When my entitled daughter-in-law saw me at my granddaughter's wedding, she screamed, "This old shrew wasn't on the guest list. You let anyone walk in here? Get the owner now." I stayed silent. The manager turned to me. "Mrs. Anderson, shall I cancel their event at your country club?" Their jaws dropped. "If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me paint you the picture of how we got to this delicious moment. My name is Margaret Anderson. I'm 68 years old, and I've been dealing with Jennifer's entitled attitude for the past 7 years since she convinced my son Robert to cut me out of their lives. But this particular Saturday in October was different. This was the day she finally went too far. The wedding was at Willowbrook Country Club, the most exclusive venue in our county. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and a reputation that took generations to build. My granddaughter Emma had dreamed of having her wedding there since she was 12. When she got engaged 6 months ago, she'd secretly called me, tears in her voice, saying she'd never be able to afford her dream venue. What Jennifer didn't know was that Emma and I had been maintaining a close relationship for the past 7 years. What Jennifer also didn't know was that when Emma told me months ago about wanting to get married at Willowbrook someday, I'd quietly started making arrangements to ensure my granddaughter could have her dream venue. When Emma called me last week to invite me to the wedding, I was already prepared to make sure everything would be perfect. I'd arrived fashionably on time, wearing my best navy dress and the pearl earrings Emma had given me for my birthday. Emma looked radiant in her grandmother's restored lace gown, the one I'd worn 35 years ago and had secretly preserved for this day. The ceremony had been beautiful, and now guests were mingling in the grand ballroom, champagne glasses clinking, laughter filling the air. That's when Jennifer spotted me. She'd been holding court near the head table, regaling some poor souls with stories about how she'd personally convinced the club management to accommodate their special requests. Her voice carried that particular tone she used when she wanted everyone to know how important she was. Then her eyes landed on me, and her expression changed completely. The practiced smile vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. She excused herself from her audience and marched across the room with the determination of a woman on a mission. "Margaret," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I wasn't expecting to see you here." I took a sip of my champagne, savoring both the excellent vintage and the moment. "Hello, Jennifer. Beautiful wedding, isn't it?" Her smile tightened. "Yes, well, Robert and I worked very hard to make sure everything was perfect. This venue doesn't accept just anyone, you know." The condescension in her voice was nothing new. For 7 years, during our brief encounters at family events, Emma secretly arranged she'd been making little comments, subtle digs designed to remind me that she considered herself superior. Usually, I let them slide. Today felt different. "I'm sure you did work very hard," I agreed mildly. Something in my tone must have irritated her because her mask slipped further. "Actually, Margaret, I need to ask you something. How exactly did you get in here? I have the final guest list, and I don't recall adding your name." Several nearby guests had started to notice our conversation. I could feel their attention shifting toward us, that particular energy that signals drama brewing. "Emma invited me," I said simply. "Emma?" Jennifer's voice went up an octave. "Emma doesn't manage the guest list. I handled all the invitations personally, every single one." That's when I realized what was happening. Jennifer hadn't just forgotten to invite me, she'd deliberately excluded me from my own granddaughter's wedding, probably never even thinking to ask Emma if she wanted her grandmother there. The hurt hit me first, sharp and unexpected, but it was quickly followed by something else entirely. A cold, clear anticipation that I hadn't felt in 2 years. What happened next was 7 years of accumulated slights and insults finally reaching their breaking point. "I think there's been some mistake," I said, my voice still calm despite the anticipation building inside me. "Perhaps you should check with Emma." Jennifer's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "Oh, please, Emma was far too busy with dress fittings and flower arrangements to worry about every tiny detail. I handled the guest list myself, and I can assure you that I know exactly who belongs here and who doesn't." The conversation was definitely drawing attention now. I could see Robert across the room, deep in conversation with the photographer, completely oblivious to the scene his wife was creating. Emma was somewhere on the dance floor with her new husband, lost in newlywed bliss. Tiny detail, I repeated quietly. Is that what I am to you, Jennifer? For just a moment, her facade cracked completely. Look, Margaret, I know this might hurt your feelings, but this is a sophisticated venue with a certain caliber of guests. We needed to be selective. The implication hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. According to Jennifer, I wasn't sophisticated enough for my granddaughter's wedding. I wasn't the right caliber of guest. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne, and I helped myself to a fresh glass. I needed a moment to think, to savor this moment before I revealed what I knew was coming. The old Margaret would have quietly excused herself, perhaps made some excuse about not feeling well. She would have called a taxi and slipped out the back door, nursing her wounded pride in private. But the woman standing here tonight wasn't the same person who'd been quietly taking Jennifer's abuse for 7 years. This woman had been planning for this moment ever since she'd won $53 million in the state lottery 2 years ago. You know what, Jennifer? I said, setting down my glass with deliberate precision. You're absolutely right. This is a sophisticated venue, and they do maintain certain standards. She looked surprised by my agreement, then pleased. I'm glad you understand. I'm sure Emma will want to take you to lunch next week to celebrate privately. Oh, I understand perfectly, I continued. In fact, I think I should probably speak to someone in management about this situation. Make sure everyone knows exactly where they stand. Jennifer's smile grew wider. What a wonderful idea. I'm sure they'll be very professional about helping you find the exit. That's when she made the mistake that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Instead of letting me walk away quietly, instead of accepting that I was graciously admitting defeat, she decided to twist the knife. You know, Margaret, she said, loud enough for the growing circle of eavesdroppers to hear, I think this might be for the best. These kinds of events can be overwhelming for people your age. All the noise, the crowds, the late hours. Really, you'd probably be more comfortable at home with your little television programs and your coupon clipping. The condescension in her voice was breathtaking. She wasn't just dismissing me. She was painting me as a doddering old woman who couldn't handle adult social situations and lived on Social Security. And besides, she continued, apparently not content with mere condescension, I'm sure you have better things to do with your limited resources than trying to keep up with events that are frankly above your means. That last comment revealed something crucial. Jennifer thought I was some pathetic widow scraping by on a pension, desperately trying to crash upscale events I couldn't afford. She had no idea what my actual financial situation was because she'd never bothered to ask. She'd never bothered to learn anything real about me at all. You're absolutely right, I said, my voice growing stronger. I should definitely speak to management. In fact, I think I'll ask for the owner personally. Jennifer's eyes lit up with malicious glee. Perfect. I'm sure they'll sort this out quickly. I'll even help you find them. She turned to wave over one of the formally dressed staff members, a young man who was clearly trying to pretend he hadn't been listening to our entire conversation. Excuse me, Jennifer called imperiously. We need to speak to whoever's in charge here. There's been a gate-crashing situation that needs immediate attention. The staff member whose name tag read Marcus approached reluctantly, his professional smile not quite hiding his discomfort with the situation. Jennifer, however, was practically glowing with anticipation. She'd positioned herself slightly behind me, as if ready to watch me be escorted out in disgrace. Of course, ma'am, Marcus said diplomatically. If you'd like to speak with management, I can certainly arrange that. Perhaps we could step into the office where it's more private. Oh no, Jennifer interrupted smoothly. I think it's better if we handle this right here. Transparency, you know. Everyone should see how professionally your establishment deals with uninvited guests. The word uninvited dripped with such venom that several guests actually stepped back. I could see faces in the crowd, people I'd known for years, friends from the garden club, neighbors, family friends. They were watching this public humiliation with a mixture of embarrassment and curiosity. Robert was still nowhere to be seen, probably discussing golf with Emma's new father-in-law. My granddaughter was spinning on the dance floor, completely unaware that her grandmother was being treated like a common trespasser at her own wedding. Mrs. Anderson, Marcus said carefully, and I noticed Jennifer's sharp intake of breath at the use of my name. He clearly recognized me as the owner, but was maintaining professional discretion. Would you prefer I call Mr. Phillips directly, or would you like to wait for him to make his regular rounds? Mr. Phillips? Jennifer's voice had gone up an octave. Who is Mr. Phillips? The club manager, Marcus explained, though he was looking at me with an expression that seemed almost knowing. He should be here shortly. He always checks on major events personally. Perfect, Jennifer declared. Mr. Phillips can sort this whole thing out. I'm sure he'll be very interested to know that uninvited guests are somehow getting past your security. What she didn't notice, but I certainly did, was the way Marcus's jaw tightened at her tone, the way his professional smile became slightly more forced. Jennifer was making assumptions about her importance that were about to prove problematic. In the meantime, she continued, perhaps this person could wait somewhere less visible? We have photographers documenting the evening, and I'm sure you understand that we can't have inappropriate individuals in the background of the official photos. Inappropriate individuals. The phrase hung in the air like a challenge. I'd been holding my tongue, letting Jennifer dig her hole deeper and deeper, but that phrase pushed me past my limit. Not because it hurt, but because it was time to begin revealing just how spectacularly wrong she was about everything. Jennifer, I said quietly, are you quite sure you want to continue this conversation in public? Something in my tone made her pause. For just a moment I saw uncertainty flicker across her face. But her pride and her audience wouldn't let her back down. I'm simply trying to protect the dignity of this event, she said, raising her chin. Emma deserves to have her special day respected. Emma deserves better than this, I agreed. She deserves better than having her grandmother publicly humiliated at her own wedding. Her grandmother was invited, Jennifer shot back. You, however, were not. That's when I saw him. Robert, finally breaking away from his conversation, heading in our direction with a confused expression. He'd clearly noticed the crowd gathering and was coming to investigate. This was going to be interesting. Was my own son going to support his wife's cruelty? Or was he going to remember that I was his mother? Mom? Robert called out as he approached. What's going on here? Jennifer immediately turned to him, her expression shifting to wounded innocence. Oh, Robert, thank goodness. Your mother is here, and she seems confused about the guest arrangements. I've been trying to explain gently that there's been some kind of misunderstanding. I watched my son's face carefully, looking for any sign of what he truly knew. Had Jennifer really convinced him to exclude his own mother from the wedding? Or had she acted on her own? Mom, Robert said slowly. We haven't really talked in 7 years, I finished for him. Not since Jennifer decided our family would be better off without me in it. Robert's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, guilt, and then something that looked suspiciously like relief mixed with apprehension. Jennifer, he said carefully, didn't we discuss inviting Mom? Jennifer's confidence wavered slightly. We talked about it, but you said yourself that she probably wouldn't want to come, that it might be awkward given our history. What I said, Robert replied, his voice getting firmer, was that I hoped she would want to come despite our problems. I never said not to invite her. Before Jennifer could respond, Marcus cleared his throat respectfully. Excuse me, but Mr. Phillips is here now if you'd still like to speak with him. I turned to see a distinguished man in his 50s approaching our group. He wore the confident bearing of someone accustomed to managing difficult situations and demanding clients. Jennifer straightened immediately, preparing to present her case to the authority figure who would surely vindicate her position. Mr. Phillips, she said with renewed confidence, thank you for coming. We have a situation here that requires your immediate attention. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for since I'd written the check to purchase Willowbrook Country Club 13 months ago. Mr. Phillips approached with the measured pace of a man who dealt with 1,000 similar situations. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suit impeccably tailored, and his expression professionally neutral. This was clearly someone who knew how to handle difficult guests without breaking a sweat. Good evening, he said smoothly. I understand there's some concern about the guest arrangements? Jennifer stepped forward immediately, assuming the role of wronged party. Yes, there absolutely is. This woman, she gestured toward me, claims she has a right to be here, but she's definitely not on our authorized guest list. I personally managed every invitation, and I can guarantee you she wasn't included. Mr. Phillips nodded thoughtfully, then turned his attention to me. And you are? Margaret Anderson. I replied simply. I watched his face carefully as I said my name. What I saw was exactly what I'd expected, a brief tightening around his eyes, followed by something that might have been suppressed amusement. I see, he said carefully. And Mrs. Anderson, you believe you should be on the guest list for this event? I believe, I said clearly, that I have every right to be here tonight. Jennifer made an exasperated sound. Right? What right could she possibly have? This is a private event at an exclusive venue. You can't just walk in because you feel like attending a party. That's quite true, Mr. Phillips agreed. Willowbrook does maintain very strict policies about event attendance. Jennifer practically preened at his validation. Exactly. I'm sure you can see how awkward this is for everyone involved. Perhaps if security could escort her out discreetly? Robert was looking increasingly uncomfortable, glancing between his wife and his mother with growing distress. Jennifer, maybe we should discuss this privately before involving security. There's nothing to discuss, Jennifer snapped. She doesn't belong here, and I won't have Emma's perfect wedding ruined by some uninvited drama. That's when Mr. Phillips surprised everyone by asking the question I'd been hoping for. Actually, he said thoughtfully, before we make any decisions about Mrs. Anderson's status, perhaps I should clarify something. Mrs. Anderson, when you say you have a right to be here, are you referring to a specific invitation? Or something else? The question was asked with such careful precision that I knew he understood exactly what was happening, but he was giving me the opportunity to reveal the truth on my own terms. Something else, I confirmed. Jennifer rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, please. What could possibly give her more right to be here than the actual paying customers? The crowd around us had grown larger, and I could see Emma's new husband whispering in her ear, pointing in our direction. My granddaughter's face went from confusion to concern as she realized her grandmother was at the center of some kind of commotion. Jennifer, I said quietly, are you absolutely certain you want to continue this line of questioning? For the first time since this confrontation began, I saw genuine uncertainty flicker across her face, but she was too far in now, too committed to her performance. I want this sorted out immediately, she declared. Mr. Phillips, I insist that you remove this person from the premises right now. Mr. Phillips looked around at the growing crowd, then back at Jennifer. Ma'am, I appreciate your concern for the event's integrity. However, before I take any action, I need to ask you directly, are you the party responsible for this evening's charges? Of course I am, Jennifer said proudly. My husband and I personally guaranteed payment for this entire event. Every detail, every expense, every accommodation. I see. And you're confident in your authority to determine who may or may not attend? Absolutely. This is our event, at our expense, with our guest list. Mr. Phillips nodded slowly, then turned to me with what I was now certain was barely contained amusement. Mrs. Anderson, would you like to clarify your relationship to this venue? This was it. The moment I'd been building toward for the past 20 minutes. The moment when Jennifer's arrogance and cruelty would finally catch up with her. Certainly, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the now silent ballroom. I own it. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the jazz quartet still playing softly in the corner, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding 20 feet away. Jennifer's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, and then a growing horror as the implications began to sink in. You... what? She whispered. I own Willowbrook Country Club, I repeated, louder this time. I bought it last year after I won the lottery. Robert's face had gone completely white. Mom, what are you talking about? 2 years ago, I won $53 million in the state lottery. I didn't tell anyone because I wanted to see who would love me for myself. Not my money. When the previous owner had a heart attack and needed to sell quickly, I saw an opportunity to make a smart investment. I gestured around the beautiful ballroom with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Every detail you've been admiring tonight, Jennifer, I own it. Every sophisticated element you've been bragging about, I paid for it. Jennifer was staring at me as if I'd grown a second head. That's impossible. You live in that little house on Maple Street. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. You shop with coupons. I live modestly because I choose to, I replied calmly. Amazing how differently people treat you when they think you're just a poor widow, isn't it? The transformation on Jennifer's face was extraordinary to watch. The smug confidence melted away like ice cream in August, replaced by a dawning realization of just how catastrophically she'd miscalculated. "You're lying," she said weakly. "This is some kind of joke." Mr. Phillips pulled out his phone with practiced efficiency. "Would you like me to show her the ownership documents, Mrs. Anderson? Or perhaps the account information showing tonight's charges?" "The account information will be sufficient," I said graciously. He tapped his screen a few times, then held it out toward Jennifer. "As you can see, tonight's event is being billed to Anderson Holdings, LLC. Mrs. Anderson's company has been our primary account holder since the acquisition." Jennifer stared at the screen like it was written in hieroglyphics. But Robert arranged everything. The booking, the payments, the menu selections." "Actually," Robert said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, "when I called to make the reservation, they told me the event was already pre-approved and they were waiting for the final head count. That's because I authorized it," I explained patiently. "When Emma called me crying about her dream wedding, I made sure everything would be perfect for her special day." "You authorized it," Jennifer repeated mechanically. "I also waived the standard facility fee, upgraded the catering package, and personally selected the vintage champagne you've been enjoying all evening." Each word landed like a physical blow. Jennifer's mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound emerged. Robert looked stricken. "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" "I wanted Emma to believe that her parents had made this magical day happen," I replied. "I thought it would mean more to her if she believed you had moved heaven and earth to give her the perfect wedding." The crowd was growing restless, sensing that the climax of this drama was still coming. Emma and her new husband had made their way closer. Emma's face, a mask of growing horror as she began to understand what her mother had done. "Grandma?" Emma's voice was small and frightened. "What's happening?" Before I could answer, Jennifer seemed to find her voice again. "This is ridiculous. Even if you do own this place, that doesn't give you the right to crash our private event." The audacity was breathtaking, even faced with undeniable proof. She was doubling down. "Our private event," I repeated thoughtfully. "Jennifer, would you like to know how much tonight is costing?" "I already know how much it's costing," she snapped. "We're paying for it. Actually, you're not. Your portion covers the basic rental fee for the ballroom. I'm covering everything else, the upgraded catering, the premium bar service, the enhanced floral arrangements, the additional staff, the extended hours. Your contribution covers about 18% of tonight's actual costs." Robert's face went from white to green. "How much are we talking about, Mom?" "The total bill for tonight will be approximately $47,000. The number hung in the air like a thunderclap. "Your portion," I continued calmly, "is $8,500. I'm covering the remaining $38,500 as a gift to Emma." Jennifer was shaking her head frantically. No, that's not right. We budgeted $15,000 for the venue. The manager told us that covered everything." "Mr. Phillips told you that $8,500 covered the basic rental," I corrected. "I believe there may have been some miscommunication about what everything included." Mr. Phillips stepped forward diplomatically. When Mr. Anderson called to book the event, I explained that Mrs. Anderson had already approved enhanced services for her granddaughter's wedding. The pricing he was quoted reflected only the portion not covered by Mrs. Anderson's account. "But we thought," Robert started, then stopped, the full picture finally becoming clear. "You thought you were the big shots who'd secured the impossible booking through your own influence and wealth," I said gently. "And I let you think that, because I wanted Emma to be proud of what her parents had accomplished." Emma was crying now, though whether from embarrassment or gratitude, I couldn't tell. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I had no idea they hadn't invited you properly. You have nothing to apologize for. Sweetheart, this is your special day, and nothing that's happened here changes how beautiful you look or how much we all love you." But Jennifer wasn't finished. Even cornered, even humiliated, she wasn't ready to surrender. "Fine," she said, her voice sharp with desperation. "So you own the place. That doesn't change the fact that you weren't invited. This is still our family event, and we still have the right to decide who attends." The legal implications of what she was suggesting sent a murmur through the crowd. She was essentially arguing that paying for an event at a venue gave her the right to exclude the venue's owner. Mr. Phillips looked positively alarmed. "Ma'am, I'm not sure that's exactly how venue rental agreements work. Actually, I said thoughtfully, she raises an interesting point. Jennifer believes that paying for an event gives her absolute authority over the guest list, even if it means excluding family members. I looked around at the crowd, making sure everyone was listening carefully. So let me ask you this, Jennifer. If paying for an event gives someone the right to control the guest list, and I'm paying for 82% of tonight's costs, what exactly do you think that means for your authority? The mathematical reality of the situation hit Jennifer like a freight train. If payment determined authority, then her $8,000 contribution gave her exactly 18% control over tonight's decisions. And 18% wasn't nearly enough to exclude the person covering the other 82%. You can't, she stammered, finally understanding that she'd been arguing from a position that completely undermined her own authority. Can't what? I asked mildly. Can't attend an event I'm paying for at a venue I own? I'm curious about the logic there. Robert stepped forward, his face flushed with embarrassment. Mom, I think there's been a massive misunderstanding. Jennifer, why don't we— No, Jennifer cut him off, her voice rising to a pitch that was definitely going to be audible on someone's wedding video. I don't care who owns what or who paid for what. She wasn't invited, and that should be the end of it. The irony was becoming almost painful to watch. Jennifer had started this confrontation by publicly humiliating me about not belonging at a sophisticated venue. Now she was essentially arguing that ownership and payment were irrelevant to attendance rights. You know what? I said, pulling out my phone. You've raised such an interesting legal question that I think we should get an expert opinion. I scrolled through my contacts and tapped on a familiar name. Harold? Yes, it's Margaret. I'm sorry to bother you on a Saturday evening, but I have a fascinating contract law question for you. Harold Peterson had been my attorney for 20 years and was probably enjoying a quiet dinner with his wife. But as one of the state's most respected contract lawyers, he'd find this situation academically interesting. I'm at a venue I own for an event I'm 82% funding, I continued loudly enough for everyone to hear. One of the other parties is arguing that their 18% contribution gives them the right to exclude me from attendance. Could you clarify the legal standing of that position? I could hear Harold's laughter through the phone. Margaret, please tell me you're not in the middle of some kind of contract dispute at a social event. Actually, I'm at Emma's wedding, and it's becoming quite educational. Put me on speaker, Harold said immediately. This I have to hear. I obliged, and Harold's voice rang out clearly in the increasingly silent ballroom. Good evening, everyone. I'm Harold Peterson, Mrs. Anderson's legal counsel. Would someone like to explain this situation to me? Jennifer looked like she was about to faint, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. Mr. Peterson, I'm Jennifer Anderson. My husband and I paid for this event, and we have the right to control the guest list. This woman, she gestured at me with visible disdain, was not invited. I see, Harold said thoughtfully. And Mrs. Anderson, what's your position? I own the venue, and I'm covering 82% of the event costs. Jennifer is arguing that her 18% contribution gives her authority to exclude me. The silence that followed was so profound I could hear Harold typing on his keyboard. Mrs. Anderson, he said finally, in my professional opinion, Mrs. Jennifer Anderson's position is not only legally baseless, but potentially actionable. If she attempts to exclude you from an event you're funding at a venue you own, she could potentially be liable for harassment, trespassing on commercial property, and interference with business operations. Jennifer's face had gone from red to white to an alarming shade of green. However, Harold continued, I would recommend resolving this matter diplomatically rather than pursuing legal remedies. Family gatherings rarely benefit from litigation. Thank you, Harold, I said sweetly. That clarifies things beautifully. I ended the call and looked around at the assembled crowd. Emma was still crying, though now she looked more relieved than distressed. Robert appeared to be seriously reconsidering some of his life choices, and Jennifer looked like she was calculating the fastest route to the nearest exit. So, I said conversationally, now that we've established the legal framework, perhaps we can move forward with the evening. But I wasn't quite finished with Jennifer yet. 7 years of being treated like an unwanted burden had built up a substantial debt of justice, and tonight seemed like an excellent time to collect. Jennifer, I said, my voice carrying the authority of someone who'd just been confirmed as holding all the cards. Before we continue with the festivities, I think we should address a few things. She looked at me with the expression of someone who just realized they were trapped in a room with no exits. First, I'd like you to apologize to Emma for creating this scene at her wedding. Grandma, you don't have to, Emma started. Yes, I do, I said firmly. Your mother chose to turn your reception into a public spectacle rather than handle a simple misunderstanding with grace. That was selfish and cruel. Jennifer's mouth opened, but no words came out. Second, I continued, you owe every guest here an apology for subjecting them to this embarrassing display instead of simply asking quiet questions about perceived problems. The crowd was watching this unfold with the fascination of people witnessing something they'd never see again. And third, I said, my voice growing softer but more dangerous, you owe me an apology for 7 years of treating me like an inconvenient burden instead of recognizing that I'm the woman who's been quietly supporting your family in more ways than you ever bothered to discover. That's when Jennifer finally found her voice again. And what came out revealed exactly who she really was underneath all the pretense and performance. I don't owe you anything, she hissed. Rich or poor, you're still a meddling old woman who can't accept that your son has a new family now. The gasp from the crowd was audible, even by Jennifer's standards. This was shockingly cruel, but for me it was perfect, because it finally showed everyone exactly who they were dealing with, and it gave me the justification I needed for what I was about to reveal next. Jennifer's words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Rich or poor, you're still a meddling old woman who can't accept that your son has a new family now. The collective intake of breath from our audience was audible, but what followed was something I hadn't expected. Scattered applause. Not sarcastic clapping, but genuine appreciation from guests who'd apparently been waiting years for someone to finally call Jennifer out on her behavior. Well, I said calmly, that certainly clarifies your position. And you know what, Jennifer? You're absolutely right about one thing. I am a meddling old woman. I've been meddling in your life for the past 2 years, and you never even noticed. Her expression shifted from defiant to confused. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the $42,000 I've quietly transferred to your joint account since I won the lottery. Every time Robert mentioned you were temporarily tight on money, every time he worried about making ends meet, I meddled by making deposits through my investment firm so my son wouldn't stress about finances. Robert's face went completely pale. Mom, what deposits? The ones your bank statements show as portfolio returns and dividend payments. Jennifer, didn't you ever wonder why your investments were performing so remarkably well during economic uncertainty? I could practically see the wheels turning in Jennifer's head as she tried to calculate how much of their comfortable lifestyle had been secretly subsidized by the woman she'd just publicly insulted. I also meddled by paying off Emma's student loans when you two were struggling with that house payment. You know, the house that was $30,000 over your budget? The one Jennifer convinced you was an investment in our future? Emma gasped. Grandma, you paid off my loans? Every penny. Sweetheart, after I won the lottery, I set up an anonymous loan forgiveness program that mysteriously selected you. Your parents thought you'd been chosen for some merit-based program. I may have encouraged that misconception. Jennifer was now looking around the crowd with growing panic, finally understanding that this wasn't just about tonight's wedding. This was about 2 years of secrets coming to light in the most public way possible. And I meddled by co-signing Robert's business expansion loan when the bank wanted additional collateral. You know, the expansion that doubled his income and allowed you to quit your job to focus on personal enrichment activities. The personal enrichment comment hit its mark. Jennifer's idea of enrichment involved yoga retreats and wine-tasting courses while Robert worked 60-hour weeks. But my most significant meddling, I continued, savoring every word, was paying for your country club membership when your application was initially declined. If Jennifer's face got any whiter, she was going to need medical attention. Declined? Robert whispered. Oh yes, the membership committee had some concerns about Jennifer's references. Apparently several people had shared stories about her behavior at social events, but I wrote a personal recommendation and covered the initiation fees. All because I wanted my son's wife to feel accepted in the community. The crowd was now openly staring at Jennifer, and several club members looked like they were remembering specific incidents that had contributed to those concerns. "You're lying," Jennifer said weakly, but her heart wasn't in it anymore. "Mr. Phillips," I called out, "would you mind confirming when the Anderson family membership fees were last paid?" He consulted his phone again. "The account shows payments through 2026, prepaid by Anderson Holdings, LLC in January. So even your precious country club membership, the one you've been bragging about all evening, was paid for by the meddling old woman you just insulted in front of everyone." That's when Jennifer made her biggest mistake of the evening. Instead of apologizing, instead of recognizing that she was completely outmatched, she decided to go nuclear. "Fine!" she screamed, loud enough to stop the band mid-song. "You want to play games with money? Let's see how you feel when Robert chooses between his manipulative mother and his wife." She grabbed Robert's arm and started pulling him toward the exit. "We're leaving, right now, and if you ever want to see your grandchildren again, you'll stop this public humiliation immediately." Robert resisted her pull, looking back and forth between his wife and his mother with obvious anguish. "Jennifer, please, let's just calm down and—" "No!" she shrieked. "I'm done being manipulated by this woman. Choose, Robert, right now, your wife and children or her." The ultimatum hung in the air like a loaded gun. Jennifer had just demanded that my son choose between his family and his mother at his daughter's wedding, in front of 100 witnesses. But what she didn't know was that ultimatums only work when you actually hold the power position. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, frozen by the drama unfolding before them. Emma was crying openly now, her perfect wedding day turning into a nightmare of family destruction. Robert stood paralyzed between his wife and his mother, his face a mask of anguish. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Well, Robert?" Jennifer demanded, her voice shrill with hysteria. "Are you going to let your mother continue manipulating our family, or are you going to stand by your wife?" Before Robert could answer, I stepped forward. "Actually, Jennifer, since you're so fond of ultimatums, let me give you one of my own." Her eyes widened, but she was too far gone to back down now. "You have two choices," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room. "You can apologize to everyone here for the scene you've created, thank me graciously for supporting your family all these years, and we can finish Emma's wedding like civilized people." I paused, letting the first option sink in. "Or you can continue this tantrum, and I can show everyone exactly what happens when you bite the hand that's been feeding you for 2 years." "What's that supposed to mean?" Jennifer snapped. I pulled out my phone again and opened my banking app. "It means I can cancel every automatic transfer, every account subsidy, and every financial arrangement I've made on your behalf. Tonight, right now, while everyone watches." Robert's face went from pale to gray. "Mom, please." "Oh, I'm not finished," I continued, warming to my theme. "I can also call the mortgage company on Monday and explain that the co-signer wants to review the terms of her guarantee. I wonder how they'll feel about your payment history once my backing is removed." Jennifer was shaking now, finally understanding the precarious foundation their entire lifestyle was built on. "And then there's the country club membership. I imagine the board would be very interested to learn about tonight's behavior, especially since the membership agreement includes clauses about conduct reflecting on the club's reputation." "You wouldn't," Jennifer whispered. "Wouldn't I?" I asked mildly. "You just publicly called me a manipulative old woman and demanded that my son choose between his wife and his mother at my granddaughter's wedding, which I paid for, at a venue I own." The crowd was watching this unfold with the fascination of people witnessing a master class in controlled destruction. "But wait," I said, as if I'd just remembered something delightful. "There's more." I scrolled through my phone contacts and found another number. "Jennifer, you remember Dr. Harrison, don't you? Robert's business partner?" Her face went even whiter, if that was possible. "Funny story about that partnership. When Robert wanted to expand the practice but couldn't qualify for the business loan, Dr. Harrison wasn't comfortable taking on all the financial risk himself. So I provided the collateral, after my lottery win, of course." I let that sink in for a moment. If I were to call Dr. Harrison right now and explain that I need to reassess my investment in the practice due to family issues, well, partnerships can be so fragile, can't they? Robert looked like he was about to be sick. Mom, you can't be serious. Oh, I'm absolutely serious. Your wife seems to think I'm a powerless old woman she can abuse publicly without consequences. I'm simply clarifying the actual power dynamics in our relationship. Emma suddenly stepped forward, her wedding dress rustling as she moved. Stop. All of you, just stop. Everyone turned to look at her, this beautiful young woman whose special day had been destroyed by adult petty politics. Mom, Emma said, looking directly at Jennifer, apologize to Grandma, right now. Emma, sweetheart, you don't understand, Jennifer started. I understand perfectly, Emma interrupted, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. I understand that Grandma paid for my education, helped with your house, supported Dad's business, and paid for this wedding. I understand that you just publicly humiliated the woman who's been supporting our family for years. And I understand that if you don't apologize right now, you're going to destroy what's left of this family. Jennifer looked around the room desperately, searching for an ally, but finding only faces filled with disapproval and disgust. And if you think, Emma continued, that I'm going to let you use me and my future children as weapons against Grandma, you're insane. She's been nothing but loving and generous, and you've been treating her like garbage. That's when Robert finally found his spine. Jennifer, he said quietly, apologize to my mother. Now. The word now carried the weight of 2 years of suppressed frustration and mounting realization of what his wife had really been doing to his family. But Jennifer had one more card to play, and she was desperate enough to use it. Fine, she said, her voice cold as winter. But before I apologize for anything, I think everyone should know the whole truth about your precious Margaret. The threat in Jennifer's voice was unmistakable, and I felt a chill of apprehension. After 7 years of estrangement, she didn't know much about my recent life, but she might know things about my past that could be damaging if twisted the right way. What truth would that be, Jennifer? I asked calmly, though my heart was racing. She smiled, and it was the ugliest expression I'd ever seen on a human face. The truth about why you really do all this financial manipulation. It's not generosity, Margaret. It's control. You're a lonely old woman who buys people's affection because you know they don't actually want you around. The words hit like physical blows because they contained just enough truth to sting. I did sometimes wonder if my help was appreciated or simply tolerated. You want to know what Robert really says about you when you're not around? Jennifer continued, emboldened by my silence. He calls you the guilt machine, always showing up with solutions to problems nobody asked you to solve, always making everyone feel obligated to include you in things. Robert's face was frozen in horror. Jennifer, don't. No, I think it's time for some honesty, she pressed on. Tell her, Robert. Tell her about Christmas dinner when you said you wished she'd just let you handle your own problems for once instead of swooping in with her checkbook. Each word was calculated to wound, and I won't lie, they were hitting their marks. But something interesting was happening in the crowd around us. Instead of nodding in agreement, people were looking increasingly disgusted with Jennifer's cruelty. Tell her about how you said her constant financial help makes you feel like a failure as a provider, Jennifer continued relentlessly. Tell her how you said she uses money to make everyone dance to her tune. Robert was shaking his head frantically. Those weren't, you're taking things out of context. Am I? Jennifer laughed bitterly. Or am I finally saying what everyone's been thinking for years? That Margaret Anderson is a lonely old woman who can't stand not being the center of attention? That's when something unexpected happened. Harold Peterson, my attorney, spoke up from the crowd. He'd apparently arrived during the drama and had been quietly listening. Mrs. Jennifer Anderson, he said clearly, I think you should stop talking now. Jennifer whirled around to face him. Excuse me? As Mrs. Anderson's legal counsel, I'm advising you that your current statements could be construed as defamatory, and they're being made in front of numerous witnesses. I'm just telling the truth, Jennifer protested. Actually, Harold continued, you're making claims about Mrs. Anderson's motivations that you have no way of substantiating. More importantly, you're doing so in a manner designed to cause emotional distress and damage her reputation. She's my mother-in-law. I have the right to— You have the right to remain silent, Harold interrupted smoothly, which I would strongly recommend you exercise immediately. But Jennifer was beyond rational thinking now. 7 years of resentment and frustration were pouring out in a toxic flood. "You want to know the real truth?" she screamed. "The truth is that Margaret has been playing puppet master with our lives since the day she won that lottery. Every gift, every payment, every generous gesture comes with strings attached. She's been buying our compliance for years." "That's enough!" Emma's voice cut through her mother's tirade like a knife. "Mom, you need to stop this right now." But Jennifer was in full meltdown mode. "No, Emma, you need to hear this. Your grandmother isn't the saint you think she is. She's a controlling, manipulative woman who—" "Who what?" Emma interrupted, her voice dangerously quiet. "Who paid for my education so I wouldn't graduate with debt? Who made sure Dad's business succeeded so we'd have financial security? Who's been quietly taking care of our family for years while asking for nothing in return except basic respect?" Jennifer's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "You know what I think?" Emma continued, her voice growing stronger. "I think you're angry because Grandma's generosity makes your selfishness look even worse by comparison. I think you've been taking advantage of her kindness for years, and now you're embarrassed that everyone can see it." "That's not—" Jennifer started. "It is exactly that," Robert said quietly, finally speaking up. "Emma's right. Mom, I owe you an apology. A huge one." He turned to face me directly. "I never said those things Jennifer claimed. At least, not the way she presented them. Yes, I sometimes felt uncomfortable accepting your help, but not because I didn't appreciate it, because I felt like I should be able to provide for my family without my mother's assistance." He took a shaky breath. "And yes, there were times when I wished I could give you things instead of the other way around. But that was about my pride, not about your motivations." Jennifer was staring at her husband like he'd grown a second head. "Robert, what are you doing?" "I'm telling the truth," he replied. "Something you seem to have forgotten how to do." That's when I noticed something that made my heart stop. Emma's new husband was recording everything on his phone, and based on the number of other devices I could see pointed in our direction, this entire confrontation was being documented by multiple people. In about 12 hours, Jennifer's meltdown was going to be viral. But first, she had one more grenade to throw. The crowd had grown uncomfortably large now, with people from other events in the building drifting over to see what the commotion was about. The jazz quartet had given up all pretense of playing background music and was openly watching the drama unfold. Jennifer stood in the center of it all. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, her carefully styled hair now disheveled from running her hands through it in frustration. She looked like a woman who'd lost everything and was determined to take everyone down with her. "Fine!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with desperation. "You want the truth? The real truth? Margaret, your precious son has been lying to you for months." Emma moved closer to her new husband, who immediately put a protective arm around her. Whatever was coming, they both sensed it was going to be bad. "What are you talking about, Jennifer?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I didn't want to know. "I'm talking about the phone calls," she said, her eyes wild with malicious glee. "The secret meetings. The lies about where he's been spending his evenings." Robert's face went completely white. "Jennifer, what are you doing?" "I'm telling your mother that her precious son has been having an affair," she screamed, loud enough to be heard in the parking lot. The gasp from the crowd was audible. Emma made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach, and her new husband looked like he was ready to physically remove Jennifer from the premises. "That's not true," Robert said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" Jennifer spun to face him, tears streaming down her face. "Then explain the late nights at the office with Sarah. Explain the phone calls you take in the garage. Explain the receipts I found for dinners at restaurants we've never been to together." The accusations hung in the air like poisonous smoke. I could see guests pulling out their phones, probably texting friends about the scandal they were witnessing. "Jennifer," Robert said quietly, "you don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I've been living with this for months, Robert, pretending I didn't notice. Pretending I didn't care, but I'm done pretending." That's when Dr. Harrison stepped forward from the crowd. I hadn't noticed him arrive, but he'd apparently been watching this disaster unfold from the sidelines. "Actually, Robert," he said clearly, "I think I can clarify this situation." All eyes turned to him, and I could see Jennifer's triumphant expression begin to waver. "Mrs. Anderson," Dr. Harrison said, addressing Jennifer directly. You're absolutely right about Robert meeting with Sarah. They have been having secret conversations and making plans behind your back. Jennifer's face lit up with vindication, but Dr. Harrison wasn't finished. However, those meetings weren't about an affair. They were about planning a surprise party for your 10th wedding anniversary next month. Sarah was helping Robert coordinate with the travel agent because her sister works for the company you used for your honeymoon. The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in the next county. A surprise party? Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. Robert wanted to recreate your honeymoon trip to Italy, Dr. Harrison continued gently. Sarah was helping him coordinate with the travel agent and the hotel where you stayed. The late nights at the office were him working extra hours to afford the trip without asking his mother for help again. Robert was staring at his wife with a mixture of heartbreak and disbelief. Jennifer, how could you think I would cheat on you? How could you think I would do that to our family? Jennifer stammered, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what she'd just done. The dinners at restaurants? Robert continued, his voice breaking. Those were meetings with the travel agent and the hotel coordinator. I was trying to surprise you with the most romantic anniversary you'd ever had. Emma was crying again, but now it seemed to be from grief rather than anger. Mom, how could you destroy everything like this? I didn't mean, Jennifer started, but the words died in her throat as she looked around at the faces surrounding her. Disgust, pity, and disappointment reflected back at her from every direction. That's when I realized something that changed everything. Jennifer wasn't evil. She was deeply, profoundly broken. Years of feeling inadequate had twisted her perception until she saw threats everywhere and kindness nowhere. But understanding her pain didn't excuse the damage she'd just done to my family. Jennifer, I said quietly, I think you need to get some help. She looked at me with red, swollen eyes. What? Professional help, therapy, counseling, something to deal with whatever has been making you so unhappy that you'd destroy your own family rather than accept kindness from someone who loves you. The ballroom had grown quiet, except for the soft sound of Jennifer's sobbing. Guests were starting to drift away, probably heading home to call their friends and family about the most dramatic wedding reception they'd ever witnessed. Emma stood in the center of it all, still beautiful in her grandmother's lace dress, but with tears in her eyes that had nothing to do with joy. Her wedding day had been ruined by her mother's paranoia and cruelty, and everyone knew it. I'm sorry, Jennifer whispered, finally looking at me directly. I'm sorry for tonight. I'm sorry for the past 7 years, and I'm sorry for being too proud and insecure to see what you were trying to do for our family. I accept your apology, I replied. But Jennifer, sorry isn't enough. You need to do the work to figure out why you've been so unhappy and why you chose to take it out on people who care about you. She nodded, tears starting again. I will. I promise I will. Robert approached his wife carefully, like someone approaching a wounded animal. Jennifer, we need to talk. Seriously, about everything, about us, about our marriage, about getting help. I know, she said quietly. I know I messed up. I know I've been difficult. I just felt like everyone was moving on without me, like I didn't matter to anyone anymore. That's when Emma surprised everyone by walking over and hugging her mother. Mom, she said softly, you matter to me. You matter to Dad. You even matter to Grandma, even after everything you've put her through. But you have to stop pushing away everyone who tries to love you. I watched this moment of reconciliation with mixed feelings. Part of me was proud of Emma for showing grace under pressure. Part of me was concerned that Jennifer would interpret forgiveness as permission to continue her behavior. But then Emma turned to address the remaining guests. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the ballroom, I want to thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate my marriage to David. This evening hasn't gone exactly as planned, but it's taught me something important about family. She looked at me with such love and gratitude that my heart swelled. Family isn't about who pays for what or who owes whom. It's about who shows up for each other, especially when things get difficult. And my grandmother has been showing up for our family for years, even when we didn't deserve it. The remaining guests began to applaud, and I felt tears prick my eyes. So while tonight has been educational, Emma continued with a slight smile, I want everyone to know that I couldn't be happier to be married to David, and I couldn't be more grateful to have a grandmother who taught me what real love looks like. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Jennifer approached me one more time. "Margaret," she said softly, "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve it, but I want you to know that I'm going to get help. Real help, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make things right with this family." "That's a start," I replied. "But Jennifer, actions matter more than words. Show us. Don't tell us." She nodded and walked away to find Robert, who was standing by the windows looking out at the garden. Emma and David came over to say goodbye, and Emma hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, "for everything. For the wedding, for college, for never giving up on our family even when we gave up on you." "Thank you for being brave enough to invite me," I replied, "and for standing up for what's right, even when it was hard." As I drove home that night, I reflected on what had happened. 7 years of family dysfunction had exploded in the most public way possible, but maybe that's what was needed. Maybe some wounds have to be opened before they can properly heal. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Thank you for making my wedding unforgettable. Not for the drama, but for showing me what it looks like when someone stands up for themselves with grace and strength. I love you, Grandma." I smiled as I pulled into my driveway. The little house on Maple Street had never looked more welcoming. Tomorrow, I'd call Harold about setting up a college scholarship fund in Emma's name. Next week, I'd look into family therapy resources for Robert and Jennifer. But tonight, I was going to sit on my porch with a cup of tea and enjoy the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be treated poorly. After all, at 68 years old, I'd finally learned that respect isn't something you can buy with kindness or money. It's something you have to demand for yourself, and demand it I had. The lottery had given me financial freedom, but tonight had given me something even more valuable, the knowledge that I didn't have to accept mistreatment from anyone, family included. Some might call what happened tonight dramatic or over the top. I prefer to think of it as educational. Jennifer learned that actions have consequences. Robert learned that enabling bad behavior helps no one. And Emma learned that standing up for what's right is always worth doing, even when it's difficult. As for me, I learned that sometimes the most generous thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their worst impulses. Love doesn't mean accepting abuse. Love means caring enough to demand better. And that, I thought as I sipped my tea under the stars, was a lesson worth $53 million. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. For 5 years, he forgot our anniversary. This time, he posted a gym selfie instead. So I served his breakfast with a side of divorce papers. But trust me, that was just the beginning. If you're watching this, tell me where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to subscribe, because what I'm about to share might just change the way you see your own reflection. The morning started like every other, too quiet, too cold, and filled with the kind of silence that doesn't bring peace. It brings memories. I got out of bed before the sun peeked over the horizon. It was our wedding anniversary. Not that Dennis would remember. He hadn't in 5 years. Still, something inside me, something small and soft and foolish, clung to hope. I pulled out the cast iron skillet he liked, the one he said made bacon taste like his childhood. I lined up the slices just how he liked them. Toast, golden. Eggs, scrambled with that little bit of cream. Coffee, strong and black. I set the table, smoothing out the napkins like I used to when the kids were little and birthdays mattered. I even lit a candle, not because I thought he'd notice, but because I did. Then I heard it, that stupid chime his phone makes when he posts on social media. I waited a beat, holding my breath. Maybe, just maybe, he was writing something sweet, a memory, a thank you, an acknowledgement. I walked over. There it was, his face, sweaty, smug, smiling at the gym. No days off, grinding even on the weekends. Not a single word about me, about us, about our life. I stood there, still in my robe, the smell of bacon in the air, staring at a man who hadn't even glanced at me all morning. He walked into the kitchen a minute later, sniffed the air like a satisfied customer at a diner. Smells good," he said. Don't forget to flip the toast next time. It was a little too dark yesterday. That was it. No good morning. No thank you. No anniversary. I didn't say a word. I simply walked over to the counter, picked up the manila envelope I had hidden behind the flour canister, and placed it beside his plate. "What's this?" he asked, chuckling as he wiped his hands on a napkin. "More junk mail?" "It's your breakfast," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And your future." He opened it, still grinning, that stupid grin, until he saw the first page. His fork clinked against the plate. "What the hell is this, Joanne?" "Divorce papers." He laughed, but there was a tremor to it. "You're joking." I looked at him for the first time in weeks. Really looked. The lines around his eyes had deepened. His hair had gone grayer, but he still dyed it. He still cared about how he looked, but never once stopped to wonder how I felt. "I'm not joking, Dennis," I said. "Not anymore." He stood up, pointing a finger like he used to when the kids did something wrong. "You're being dramatic. You forgot our anniversary," I said quietly. "Again. Joanne, come on. That's not a reason to throw away 30 years. I took a deep breath. "No, but 30 years of being invisible is." He sat back down, rubbing his temples. "We've got a good life. We're not unhappy." "No, you're not unhappy," I corrected. "You have your gym, your routine, your little fan club online. I'm just the woman who does your laundry and refills your prescriptions." He tried to speak. I didn't let him. "I'm done being your background noise." I walked upstairs, my heart thudding so loud I thought I might faint. I sat on the edge of the bed we hadn't shared in months and stared at the old photograph on the dresser. Our wedding day. I barely recognized that girl. She had dreams. Now she had rage. That night, he didn't talk to me. Not really. He paced the living room, made a few calls, slammed a few doors. But I stayed in our bedroom, alone. It was strange how quiet the world gets when you stop begging to be heard. The next morning I woke up before him again. I didn't cook. I didn't clean. I didn't make the bed. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table and stared out the window. I watched the neighbor's dog chase squirrels. I watched the mailman pass our house like he always did. I watched the world spin on, and I thought, what now? I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew this much. I would never be forgotten again. Not by him, not by our children, not by me. And that was when I remembered the box in the attic, the one I hadn't touched in decades, the one Dennis told me to leave alone. My hands started shaking. I stood up, and I climbed the stairs. The attic smelled like old cedar and forgotten years. Dust floated through the morning light like quiet ghosts, dancing on memories too stubborn to fade. I hadn't been up here in a long, long time. Dennis always said it was his space, tools, fishing gear, crates labeled in black marker with things like taxes and Xmas lights, do not throw. But there, tucked behind a sagging bookshelf, was the box I remembered from way back, gray, dented, with a broken latch and Dennis's handwriting across the lid. Private, do not open. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the silence in the house. Maybe it was that gym selfie still burning in my brain. Or maybe it was 30 years of swallowing secrets like pills I didn't need. But I pulled the box out, coughing through the dust, and sat cross-legged on the attic floor like a child about to open a birthday present. The latch cracked open easily. The first thing I saw were letters, dozens of them, yellowed with time, bundled in string. I pulled one out. To my dearest Evelyn. Evelyn? The handwriting was Dennis's. Neat, precise, confident. The words were tender, loving, romantic in a way I hadn't seen from him in, well, ever. I read 3 letters before my hands started to tremble. He had written to her for years, years. Before we got married, during our engagement, even after our first anniversary. He loved her. He never stopped. One of the envelopes had a return address, Wichita, Kansas. Another had something else inside. A folded photo. 2 young people on a beach. Dennis and a woman I'd never seen. She had long, dark hair and a smile that screamed freedom. There was something scrawled on the back of the photo in pen. July. Before everything changed. I knew that date. That was the summer Dennis and I got engaged. My breath hitched. I dug deeper into the box, found a small envelope marked Confidential Adoption Records. My heart nearly stopped. It was a birth certificate, a baby girl, born in October. Father, Dennis Mitchell. Mother, Evelyn Harper, she had his last name, and she'd been placed for adoption a month later. I sat there, frozen. Tears welled up, but not the kind that fall sweet and soft. These were hot, angry, full of every lie I'd been fed for decades. He'd had a child before we got married, and he'd never told me. I stood up too fast and nearly lost my balance. The floorboards creaked as I made my way back down, clutching the papers like they might catch fire. When Dennis came home that evening, he tossed his gym bag by the door and grunted something about protein powder. I was waiting at the table with the letters and the photo. "Who is Evelyn?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He looked up, confused, then annoyed. "What?" "Evelyn Harper, Kansas." I pushed the photo across the table. He stared at it, and then, for the first time in years, I saw it. Panic in his eyes. "Where did you find that?" "In the box marked, 'Do not open,'" I snapped. "Guess what?" I opened it. He sat down slowly, rubbing his forehead. "That was a long time ago, Joanne. Before us. We were engaged," I hissed. "You were writing her after we were married." He didn't deny it. "I was young," he said, like that explained everything. "We made a mistake. She didn't want the baby. I didn't know how to tell you." "You had 30 years," I whispered. 30 years to say something, anything." He folded his arms, suddenly defensive. "It wasn't relevant. It's not like she's in our lives. She was your daughter," I spat. Dennis stood up, jaw clenched. "Don't act like this is some kind of betrayal. It's ancient history." "Then why keep it hidden?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why bury her in a box in the attic like she never existed?" He didn't answer. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding like a war drum. Not only had he forgotten me, he had buried part of himself, part of us, in a lie. I thought about that girl, where she was now, who she became, if she ever looked in the mirror and wondered who she looked like, and if she knew her father had traded her memory for a tidy, silent life. The next morning, I drove to the county clerk's office, requested copies, signed forms, paid fees. I didn't know what I was looking for. Closure? Vengeance? Justice? I just knew I couldn't let it sit in that box anymore. That evening, I sat alone in the living room. Dennis was at the gym again, probably flexing in front of the mirror, trying to recapture a youth that had long slipped away. My eyes drifted to the fireplace, to the mantel where family photos sat in neat rows. Weddings, graduations, smiles, all built on a lie. I picked up the photo from our 25th anniversary. He was holding a champagne glass. I was holding his hand. But when I looked closer, I could see it. My smile didn't reach my eyes. It hadn't in years. And now I knew why. I gently set the photo down. It was time to find the girl he forgot. And maybe, just maybe, find the woman I used to be. I started with the return address from one of the letters, Wichita, Kansas. It was nearly 1,000 miles away from where we lived in North Carolina. But distance didn't matter anymore. Not when the truth had already traveled so far to find me. I knew I couldn't just show up on someone's doorstep, especially not hers. She had a life, a family, maybe kids of her own. What if she didn't even know she was adopted? I needed more. I spent hours online, digging through public records, adoption registries, social media, anywhere her name might appear. The birth certificate didn't list a first name, just female Harper. But the mother's full name was there, Evelyn Harper. I found an obituary from Evelyn had passed away from cancer. No surviving spouse, no mention of children. But buried at the bottom of the digital memorial was a comment. Just a simple, "Rest easy, Mom. I miss you every day." Signed, Emily Harper, Emily. I don't know how I knew, but I just did. That was her. The next step wasn't easy. I tried to tell myself I was just looking, just curious, but deep down, I was holding on to something more, something dangerous. I was holding on to hope. Emily Harper was a teacher, 3rd grade, lived in Asheville, North Carolina, 2 hours away from me. She was beautiful, long dark hair like her mother in the photo, soft, kind eyes. I found a school newsletter with her picture in it. She had just been awarded Teacher of the Year. I sat there staring at her photo on my laptop, the glow lighting up my tear-streaked face. She looked so full of life, like someone who made the world better just by standing in it. I couldn't breathe. That night, Dennis came home to a quiet house again. I didn't speak. I didn't cook. I didn't ask how his day was. He didn't notice. He never asked why the lights were off or why I had been crying. And that told me everything. The next morning, I made a decision. I was going to meet her, not as her father's wife, not even as her stepmother, just as a woman who needed to see the truth with her own eyes. I packed a small bag and wrote a note on the kitchen counter. Just 2 words, "Don't wait." I didn't tell him where I was going. I didn't owe him that. Driving into Asheville was like entering another world. The town had charm, color, laughter spilling out of cafes. I found the school easily, parked across the street, and waited. It was a Friday. Around the front doors opened and kids began spilling out, backpacks bouncing, parents waiting with tired eyes and open arms. And then I saw her, Emily. She was standing at the entrance, kneeling down to tie a little boy's shoe. She was laughing. He hugged her neck before running off, and she waved goodbye with both hands. She turned back to head inside and stopped. Our eyes met. It was just a moment, but it felt like a lifetime. I looked away first. She kept walking. I waited until the parking lot cleared. Then I walked across the street, heart pounding. My hands were shaking as I approached the front desk. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked. "Yes, My voice broke. "I'm trying to leave something for one of your teachers, Emily Harper." She eyed me suspiciously, then softened. "Sure. What is it?" I pulled an envelope from my purse. Inside was a letter I had written the night before. It didn't say who I was, just that I knew Evelyn, that I had something important to tell Emily, and that I would be in town for one more day, staying at a small motel near the highway. "Room." The receptionist nodded, took the envelope, and I left. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the motel window with a lamp on low, staring at the parking lot, waiting for headlights that never came. By morning, I had given up hope. I was packing to leave when I heard a knock on the door. Soft, hesitant. I opened it, and there she was, Emily, wearing jeans and a cardigan, holding the envelope in one hand, her phone in the other. Her eyes were guarded, but curious. "Are you Joanne Mitchell?" she asked. I nodded. She stepped inside, cautious, sat in the chair by the window. "You said you knew my mother." I sat across from her. My throat tightened. "I did, a long time ago, but I didn't know about you." Her expression flickered. "Most people didn't. She didn't talk about it." I took a deep breath. "Emily, I don't want to hurt you. I'm not here to take anything from you. I found something you deserve to know." I slid a folder across the table. Inside, the letters, the photo, a copy of the birth certificate. She opened it, read in silence. Her face went pale. "This is..." She paused, blinking fast. "He's my..." "Yes," I whispered. "Dennis. He's your father." She didn't speak for a long time. Finally, she folded the folder shut and looked at me. "Why now?" "Because I didn't know. And when I found out, I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't live with the lie he kept for so long. And you deserve the truth." She looked away. Her lips trembled. "I always wondered," she said softly. She used to cry sometimes, looking at old photos. I think she wanted to tell me, but she was scared. Tears fell silently down her cheeks. I wanted to reach for her hand, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "You deserved more than a secret in a box." She stood up, still clutching the folder. "I don't know what to do with this," she said, "but thank you for telling me." And then she was gone. I sat in that room for hours after, not crying, just breathing, slowly, heavily, because part of me broke that day. But another part woke up. I wasn't done. Dennis had buried a child and a truth, but now I was going to bury something too, his comfort, his control, and his illusion of innocence. It was my turn now. The house was too clean when I got back, like someone had tried to scrub away the mess of a marriage with Lysol and silence. Dennis wasn't home. His car was gone, the gym bag missing from its usual place by the door. I didn't care. I walked straight into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine at noon. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel guilty about it. I stood in front of the fridge, staring at the magnet that held our last Christmas card. Smiling faces, matching sweaters, lies. My phone buzzed, a message from Emily. "I thought about what you said. I'd like to meet again, somewhere neutral." I felt the breath leave my chest. She wanted to see me. Again. We agreed on a little cafe halfway between our towns. I arrived first, picked a table near the window. Ordered tea, though my hands were shaking too hard to hold the cup. Then she walked in. This time, she wasn't wearing school clothes. Jeans, a soft gray sweater, minimal makeup. She looked more tired. but still so alive. She sat down slowly, setting her bag on the chair beside her. I read through everything, she said. I nodded. I figured. She pulled out a folded letter. There was one you didn't give me. I blinked. What? She handed me the letter. Another one from Dennis to Evelyn, hidden between the others. She must have found it in the envelope I left. I unfolded it and began to read, and my stomach twisted. I never wanted the baby. Evelyn made the decision, but I didn't fight it. I couldn't let Joanne find out, not with the wedding so close. It would have ruined everything. I can't afford that. I need to move on. Forget. I stared at the words. I felt like I was falling. Emily was quiet. I thought maybe you hadn't read that one, but maybe you did, and gave it to me anyway. I did, I said softly. You deserved to know. She looked at me then, and I saw something shift behind her eyes, something fierce. You know what hurts? She whispered. I grew up thinking I wasn't wanted because of my mother's mistakes, but he made that choice too. He erased me before I was even born. I didn't know what to say. No apology felt big enough. But then she added, and he lived his happy little life while I wondered what I was missing. I reached across the table. This time, she let me take her hand. I missed you too, I whispered. Even if I didn't know I was missing you. She wiped her eyes. You're the first person who's ever said that to me. We sat there for a long time, just breathing, just being. When we parted, she hugged me and said, he doesn't deserve to know me. I nodded. I won't tell him you reached out. That's your choice. But something in me was already moving, because it was time they knew. All of them. My kids, Dennis, everyone who ever looked at me like I was just a body in the background. I went home and pulled out every photo album, every scrapbook, every piece of evidence of the life I had carefully built. I spread them out across the living room floor. Then I pulled out a notebook and started writing. Every memory, every insult, every moment they didn't know they were breaking me. I called it the diary they never read. I recorded videos, raw, emotional, honest. I didn't name names. I didn't scream. I simply told the truth, day by day. Quiet vengeance, slow release. I uploaded them to a private channel, hidden behind a generic name, and then I waited, because one day, they'd see it. They'd see me. And when they did, I wanted them to feel it in their bones, that I wasn't their shadow anymore. I was the storm coming for their silence. It was my son's voice that finally snapped something in me. Mom, you really need to get over all this drama, he said, pacing my kitchen like he owned the place, wearing the same smug expression Dennis always had when he was trying to minimize my pain. I had called him, Matthew, my youngest, just to talk. I thought maybe he'd listen. Maybe he'd understand. I had raised him, kissed his scraped knees, stayed up during finals making grilled cheese and coffee. But now, he stood there, 33 years old, brushing off my heartbreak like it was nothing more than a change in the weather. Your father and I are separating, I told him. He blinked. So? You think I'm surprised? You two haven't been close in years. Don't you want to know why? He sighed, already tired of me. Look, I love you, but you make everything into a big deal. Just divorce him and move on. That sentence clanged through my skull like a dropped pot. Move on. As if I hadn't been stuck for 3 decades. As if healing were as simple as a signature and a suitcase. He didn't ask what Dennis had done. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just grabbed a protein bar from the pantry and said, Anyway, I've got a call in 20 minutes. Let me know when you need me to help move stuff. And then he left. That night. I couldn't sleep. My body was frozen in bed, but my mind was moving like a train with no brakes. His words echoed louder than they should have. You make everything into a big deal. I stood up. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked into his old room, still untouched, like he was 15 and home from school. Posters still on the wall, his old baseball trophies lined up neatly on the shelf. And then I saw it, his laptop. He always left it here, claiming it was a backup. I know I shouldn't have, but I did. I opened it, logged in. He never changed his password. I typed it, Panthers 2012. It opened, there, in his chat history, a thread with his brother, my oldest, Daniel. I stared at the screen, and then I started reading. Daniel, have you talked to Mom lately? She's been weird. Matthew, ugh, yeah, she's going full martyr mode again. Daniel, what's new? She thrives on guilt. Matthew, it's like she wants to be miserable. Daniel, I just avoid. It's easier. Matthew, Honestly, once Dad dumps her, maybe she'll stop pretending like she's some kind of saint. I stopped breathing. I scrolled. It got worse. Matthew, she needs therapy or a hobby. Daniel, yeah, or a reality check. They laughed at me, mocked me, my own sons. The ones I carried, raised, sacrificed for. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember walking back to my bedroom, but I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, holding my stomach like I'd been punched from the inside. I had been humiliated, first by Dennis, now by my children. The grief wasn't even sharp anymore. It was dull, heavy, and it settled into my bones. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about a marriage. It was about a lifetime of being the emotional garbage bin for everyone around me. I was the fixer, the cleaner, the planner, the comforter, never the priority, never the person they worried about. I had given everything, and they'd built their lives on my exhaustion. So I made a new plan, not to scream, not to fight, but to vanish, emotionally, piece by piece. That night, I turned off my phone. I didn't answer the door when Matthew came back a few days later, knocking, calling, texting. Are you okay? Because apparently now he was concerned. I let the unanswered texts stack up like dirty dishes. I stopped checking the group chat. I stopped responding to family updates. And something strange happened. No one really chased after me. They just moved on, like I was a temporary absence in a schedule. I watched it happen, quietly. And I began cleaning out the house, not like before. Not to tidy, but to erase myself from it, one drawer at a time, donating my old clothes, shredding paperwork, emptying shelves. It was slow, and it was holy. I started to feel lighter, and with every item I removed, every picture I took down, every cabinet I cleared, I thought, you don't get to keep pieces of me anymore. Not Dennis, not my sons, not anyone who treated my presence like background noise. I went to the bank, started shifting accounts, quietly, legally. I met with a lawyer, updated my will. I didn't cut them off entirely. No, that would be too kind. I left everything in place, but I changed the locks to my emotions. They would never know me again. Not the real me. They had proven they didn't want to, so I stopped offering. And for the first time in my life, the silence around me didn't feel empty. It felt like freedom. The wind was soft that morning, curling through the open window like a whisper, brushing against my cheek as if to say, you did it. I was standing in the doorway of my new home, small, quiet, surrounded by trees that sang in the breeze instead of shouting demands at me. The walls were painted light blue. There were flowers in the garden I had planted myself. And inside, not a single voice tried to drown me out. It had been months since I left. Months since I looked anyone in that old house in the eye. And still, no one came after me. Not Dennis, not the boys. And I didn't cry over it. Not anymore. I'd poured enough tears into people who built boats and sailed away with my devotion. Now I was the ocean, and they would feel my absence like a tide they could never control. The day started like any other, quiet and slow. I made coffee, strong and black, just how I liked it, not how Dennis used to complain about. I stepped out onto the porch and sat with my cup, letting the sun warm my face. My laptop pinged with a new comment on one of my videos, the anonymous diary I had started, the woman in the window. No names, no faces, just my voice, reading pieces of the life I used to live. The episodes were titled simply, The Burnt Toast, The Forgotten Call, The Empty Dinner Table. Thousands of people had found the channel, most of them women, most of them just like me. They commented things like, I thought I was the only one. You said what I never had the courage to. This made me cry, and then made me brave. It was healing, and it was power. Then I saw it. A new email. Subject, please mom. I stared at it. It was from Matthew. I waited a long time before opening it. I saw your videos. Someone from my office sent one in our team chat without knowing. I recognized your voice. I'm not proud of the things I said. I know I hurt you. I don't even know how to start fixing it, but I want to, if you'll let me. There was a second email, from Daniel. I'm sorry, Mom. I was a coward. I didn't want to face what I did to you, what we all did. I wish I could take it back. I closed the laptop. I didn't respond, not because I hated them, but because I finally understood something sacred. I didn't need them to be whole. I wasn't waiting for their redemption. I had already found mine. Later that week, I received a certified letter from Dennis. Inside, a handwritten note. Joanne, I saw your videos too. I didn't realize how blind I'd been until the whole world told me. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know. I see you now. I wish I had sooner. He had enclosed a check, a large one, not as a bribe, not as hush money, just labeled, "What I owe you for the life you gave me." I didn't cash it, but I didn't send it back either. I tucked it into a drawer with the letters I wrote, but never mailed. That evening, I lit a candle in the kitchen. Just one, like I did all those years ago. But this time, it wasn't for an anniversary. It was for myself. A ceremony. A beginning. I made dinner. Nothing fancy. A little pasta, garlic bread. I poured a glass of wine and sat alone at my table, and I smiled. Because I wasn't lonely. I was free. I raised my glass toward the window, toward the moon rising above the trees, and whispered, "To the woman they forgot, to the woman I found." And in that silence, where once I was invisible, I became unforgettable. The night before our anniversary, I ironed his favorite shirt, not because he asked, but because part of me still wanted to believe he might wear it and take me out somewhere, anywhere. 33 years of marriage had to count for something, but the morning came like all the others, empty. He came downstairs already dressed for the gym, tank top, shorts, headphones around his neck. I was setting the table, careful with the napkins, warming the biscuits in the oven, the way he liked them. He didn't look at me, not once, just grabbed his protein shake, gulped it down, and tapped away at his phone. I heard the little ding of a social media post. My heart dropped. I turned to see the screen. A photo of him in the gym mirror, sweat gleaming, caption, "Still grinding, no days off." No mention of me, no mention of our wedding day, no mention of 3 decades of sacrifice. I stood there frozen, the smell of biscuits rising behind me, and felt it, the shift. Like something inside me had snapped, clean and quiet, like a bone that's been cracked for years and finally gives way. He looked up then, chewing a protein bar. "What's with the food? We got company or something?" I walked over and placed his plate on the table. Eggs, toast, jam, and a plain white envelope beside his juice. He sat down, oblivious, picked up the envelope, still chewing. "What's this, a card?" he mumbled, grinning. I didn't answer. He opened it and read. His smile vanished. "Divorce?" he said, the word tasting foreign in his mouth. I nodded. "Wait, are you serious?" I looked him in the eyes for the first time in weeks, maybe months. 5 years in a row, Dennis. 5. You didn't even say good morning. He blinked like he couldn't process it. "I was heading to the gym. Didn't know you'd turn into a drama queen over a date." I laughed. It was sharp, bitter, and cold. "It's not the date. It's that you stopped seeing me somewhere around." He scoffed and stood up. "Oh, come on, Joanne. You're really going to throw away everything over this?" "No, Dennis," I said. "You threw it away, year after year, ignoring me in this house like I was the maid, smiling for strangers online while forgetting the woman who kept your life glued together." He was quiet then. For once, he had nothing to say. I walked upstairs, left him sitting there with his juice and his silence. I didn't cry. Not this time. Because somewhere deep in my bones, I already knew this wasn't about an anniversary. It was about everything that came after. And the box in the attic was calling to me. The attic door moaned as I pulled it open, the wooden ladder creaking under my weight, like it knew the burden I was carrying up with me. It wasn't just a box I was looking for. It was something more, something that had lived in shadows and dust, something Dennis had warned me never to touch. The air up there was stale and heavy with time. Old Christmas decorations, faded storage bins, a suitcase we hadn't opened since our honeymoon. And there it was, tucked far in the back, like a secret buried under decades, the gray metal box. I'd seen it for years. He always said it was work stuff, boring, not worth the trouble. I never questioned it, because that's what I was trained to do, not question. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I dragged it out into the light and knelt down. The latch was stiff but gave way. Inside were papers, old, yellowed, some creased from being folded and refolded. I pulled them out, one by one, my fingers trembling. Letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Evelyn Harper. I read the first line of one. "I miss you every day. I wish things were different." My heart slowed. I opened another. "I'll never stop loving you, even after I say I do." I couldn't breathe. They were all from Dennis, written before and after our wedding. Some had dates from the early years of our marriage, after we had moved in together. He hadn't just remembered someone from his past. He had loved her, actively, secretly, all while building a life with me. My stomach turned. At the bottom of the pile was a manila folder. Inside, official-looking documents. My hands shook as I opened it. Adoption papers, a baby girl, Emily Harper. Born October, just 6 months after our engagement, and Dennis had signed the papers. Father, Dennis R. Mitchell. Mother, Evelyn Harper. The baby had been put up for adoption a month after birth. He had a daughter, and he never told me. The attic swirled around me, my breath growing shallow, my knees threatening to buckle. I clutched the papers like a lifeline, like if I held tight enough I could stop the truth from cutting deeper. But it was too late. He had buried a child in silence, buried me in the same box. I stayed in that attic for what felt like hours, reading, rereading, letting the weight of it crush every illusion I had left. Then I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him, not yet. I wasn't going to yell or cry or beg for answers. He didn't deserve my pain. He was going to get my silence, my distance, and my plan. Because something inside me had shifted again. Only this time, it didn't break. It sharpened. And now I had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because of the wrinkles or the gray at my temples, but because of the stillness in her eyes. It wasn't numbness. It wasn't sadness. It was something colder, clearer. Resolve. I knew now that I had spent 3 decades living in the background of my own life, a faded figure in the photo of a man who never really saw me. I had loved, served, forgiven, and in return, I had been made invisible. Not anymore. I went downstairs. Dennis was already gone, off to the gym, like clockwork. His car keys were missing, his shaker bottle still on the counter, the blender unwashed. I didn't touch it. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with the adoption file, the letters, and a legal pad. I began to write, not to him, to her. Dear Emily, you don't know me, but I know your name. I know the year you were born. I know the man who gave you life, and the man who never gave you a place in his. I don't know what your life became, but I hope it was beautiful. I hope you were loved. I hope the world was softer to you than it was to the girl I used to be. The words came slowly at first, but then poured out like a river breaking through a dam. You deserve to know that you existed, that someone kept your name in a box, hidden like a wound. You deserved more. I wasn't sure if I'd ever send it, but I had to write it. I folded the letter and tucked it into my purse. And that afternoon, I drove, not far, just into town, to the library, to the local courthouse, anywhere I could start searching, for Evelyn Harper, for Emily, for a thread, a clue, a sign. It took time. Too much. I hit dead ends. But eventually, a birth record led to an obituary. Evelyn Harper, Wichita, Kansas. And in the condolence comments on the digital memorial page, buried among the prayers and the rest in peace, was one that stopped me cold. I miss you every day, Mom. I wish you had told me more. Emily. I read it over and over. She existed. She had survived. And she was looking for something too. The trail led to Asheville, North Carolina. A teacher. Elementary school. A quiet, peaceful life. 2 hours from me. I sat in my car for an hour just holding the address in my hand. The sky had turned gold, and the day was slipping into evening. I drove home in silence. That night, I packed a small bag. Nothing dramatic, just a toothbrush, a change of clothes, and the file. I didn't tell Dennis I was leaving. I left a note that said, "Don't wait up." And I drove. The road to Asheville was long and winding. The mountains rose like sentinels around me, watching, waiting. When I pulled into the parking lot of her school the next day, I didn't go in. I just sat there, behind the wheel, watching. Children poured out in waves, laughter echoing through the air. Parents waited at the curb. Teachers stood at the doors, smiling, waving. And then I saw her, Emily. Long, dark hair, warm eyes. She knelt to tie a little girl's shoe. She looked up and smiled, not at me, just at the world, and my breath caught. She was real. She was here, and she had no idea. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tight they ached. I didn't get out. Not yet. I wasn't ready. But I would be. Because this wasn't just about the daughter Dennis had hidden. It was about the woman I had forgotten. Me, and she was just beginning to wake up. The next day, I went back. I didn't wear anything special, just a soft cardigan and a pair of old slacks. Comfortable, quiet. I wasn't there to make a scene. I was there to cross a line I had waited too long to even see. I walked into the school's main office just before dismissal. The receptionist smiled politely, asked how she could help me. "I'm here to leave something for Miss Emily Harper," I said, holding out a sealed envelope. Inside was the letter I had written, along with a note. "Please read this when you're alone. If you'd like to meet, I'll be staying at the Blue Pines Motel, room." The woman nodded and placed it in a mail slot behind the desk. No questions asked. I left and waited. I didn't expect her to come. The Blue Pines was one of those roadside places with creaky floors and floral curtains from the kind of place where everything smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old pine wood. I sat by the window with the curtain cracked open, watching the parking lot. For hours. By nightfall, I told myself to let it go, to sleep, but my chest wouldn't stop buzzing. I had done something irreversible. The next morning, I was brushing my hair when I heard the knock. 3 soft taps. I froze. My hands, my breath, my thoughts, everything stopped. I opened the door. She was standing there. Emily, closer now than ever, her face full of questions, her hands gripping her phone. She looked so much like him, and not at all. Her eyes held something different. Depth, warmth, curiosity. "Are you Joanne Mitchell?" she asked. I nodded. My throat was too tight for words. "I got your letter," she said. "Can I come in?" She sat on the edge of the small motel chair, glancing at the folder I had laid out on the table. She hadn't touched it yet, just looked at me. "I don't know why I came," she said quietly, "but something in your letter, it felt honest." "It was," I whispered. She took a deep breath. "So, you were married to him?" "Yes," I said. She reached for the folder, opened it, scanned the letters. "This is real." I nodded again. "I always wondered," she murmured. "My mom never talked about him. Only once, when I was 12. She cried a little and said, 'Some truths aren't safe.' And then she never said another word." "She loved you," I said. "I can see that even from the way Dennis wrote about her." Emily scoffed. "So he loved her too, and still gave me away." The room fell into a stillness. Then she asked the question I had been dreading. "Did he ever try to find me?" I looked her in the eyes. "No." She swallowed hard. "That hurts," she whispered. I nodded. "It should." She stared down at her hands for a long time. "So why are you here?" "To tell you that you're not a secret anymore, that you matter, even if he made you feel like a mistake." "You're not. You're the truth he buried, but I won't let him bury you again." A tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it quickly. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this," she admitted. "You don't have to do anything," I said. "This isn't for him. It's for you. And maybe for me, too." She looked at me then, really looked, and nodded. We talked for 2 hours after that. Not just about Dennis, but about her life, her job, her students, her garden. She was brilliant, compassionate, brave, everything I had once hoped a daughter of mine would be. When she left, she hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for finding me." I sat on the motel bed long after the door closed, her perfume still lingering in the room, and for the first time in decades, I felt seen. But more than that, I felt real. I didn't tell Dennis, not about Emily, not about the motel, not about the truth I had dug up from the attic like bones in the dirt. He didn't deserve to know that she existed in my life now, that I had found something sacred, something his lies had tried to erase. It was mine, ours, a secret I could hold, not to keep it hidden, but to protect it from the rot he left behind. When I returned home, nothing had changed. The laundry was still in its usual pile on the floor by his side of the bed. His gym clothes draped over the back of the living room chair, like a flag planted on conquered territory. The same protein shakes filled the fridge, each one lined up like obedient little soldiers. But something in me had changed. I didn't put the clothes in the wash. I didn't cook. I didn't clean. And Dennis noticed. By day 3, he stood in the doorway, hands on hips. "What's going on with you lately?" I looked up from my notebook, calm, composed. "Nothing." "Well, I mean, the house is a mess. You haven't made dinner since last week." "You didn't notice when I did," I replied, "so I figured it wouldn't make a difference when I stopped." He rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on, Joanne. You can't seriously still be on this kick. I said I was sorry about the anniversary." "You didn't say you were sorry. You said I was being dramatic." "Well," he began. then wisely stopped himself. I stood up, slowly. "Dennis," I said, voice even, "what would you do if I disappeared?" He blinked. "What? If I just packed a bag and left? Not with a note, not with a fight, just vanished." He frowned. "That's not funny." "It's not supposed to be." He rubbed his neck, suddenly uncomfortable. "Look, if you're unhappy, we can go to counseling or something." Now he wanted counseling? Now? After 33 years of silence, invisibility, neglect, I almost laughed, but instead I said nothing, because silence had become my weapon. I started small. I stopped responding to group texts from the boys, stopped answering calls that only came when someone needed something. They didn't call to check on me. They never had. They called for recipes, for birthday reminders, for "Mom, can you send me that tax form again?" I stopped answering. I stopped being available, and no one noticed. That was the part that broke me, but it was also the part that freed me. I pulled out a small leather-bound notebook from the drawer. It was old, something I used to jot recipes in. I began turning those blank pages into a record, not of dates, but of moments. The times I was dismissed, mocked, forgotten. I titled the front, "The Diary They Never Read." Each entry was a story, like the time I stayed up until a.m. sewing Daniel's costume for the school play, and the next day he told his teacher he made it with his dad. Or the Thanksgiving I spent alone in the kitchen while everyone else watched football and laughed in the living room. Not one of them offered to help. Or the day I found out my mother had died and Dennis still asked me to pick up his dry cleaning. I filled every page. I wrote with the rage of a woman who had waited too long to scream. And then I started recording. I didn't show my face, just my voice, low and even, reading the entries. I uploaded them anonymously to a channel I called The Window Seat. I didn't expect anyone to listen, but they did. Thousands of views, hundreds of comments. Women, older, younger, somewhere in between, telling me I had written their lives. They said things like, "This is the sound of my soul. I thought I was crazy for feeling this way. You made me feel less alone." It gave me strength I didn't know I had. One night, I found Dennis asleep in the recliner, snoring, TV buzzing static, and I stared at him. Not with hatred, not with sadness, with clarity. He would never know the depths of what he broke, and I didn't need him to, because I was no longer speaking to him. I was speaking to the world, and they were listening. It was a Sunday morning when the silence in the house finally started to feel different. Not oppressive, not hollow, not just peaceful. Dennis had left early, gym again, or maybe brunch with one of his gym buddies who treated him like a motivational poster with a pulse. I didn't ask anymore. I no longer tracked his movements the way I used to, hoping for crumbs of affection. The more he disappeared, the more space I had to breathe. And today, I had plans. I opened the front closet and pulled out 3 dusty photo albums, the kind with plastic sleeves and faded labels: family vacation, Matthew's graduation, Christmas, years of captured moments, staged smiles. But I could see it now, clearer than ever. I wasn't really in them. Sure, I was physically present, off to the side, holding a plate, standing behind someone, but never in the center, never framed with care, always the background, always convenient. I laid the albums out across the floor, and then I did something I never imagined I would. I began taking the pictures out, one by one, not to destroy them, to free myself from them. Each photo went into a new box labeled "What They Remember," and beside me I placed an empty album, a fresh one. Its label, "What I Lived." Into that one I began placing my pictures, the ones no one else ever bothered to print. A blurry photo Emily had taken of me sipping tea in Asheville. A picture I'd snapped of the mountains outside the motel. A Polaroid from years ago, just me in the backyard, reading under the tree. Real moments, not posed, not performative, mine. Midway through, I paused to check my messages, not out of habit, just curiosity. There were 2 new voicemails, both from Matthew. The first one, "Mom, hey, I know you're probably mad. I just wanted to check in. Can you call me back, please?" The second one came a day later. "Okay, I saw your video, the window seat. I didn't know it was you at first, but I know now. I'm sorry, Mom, really. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize any of it." I listened without reacting. Then I deleted them both, because sometimes closure isn't a conversation. It's a decision, and I had made mine. Later that evening, I made a list. Not a to-do list, not a grocery list, a legacy list. At the top I wrote, things I will leave behind that matter. Truth, a name they'll remember, a voice that didn't stay quiet, a daughter who knows she was never forgotten, a story other women can live louder because of that night. I recorded something new. It was the first video where I let myself be seen, just my hands at first, sorting the albums, writing in the notebook. Then, slowly, I turned the camera toward myself, lines on my face, gray in my hair. I didn't apologize for it. I said, this is what a woman looks like when she stops waiting to be chosen. And I posted it. The response was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Messages poured in. Women from all over the country, from Texas to Oregon, from Maine to Miami. Some cried, some raged, some just said, thank you for showing me I'm not invisible. I had become the woman I wished I'd seen when I was younger. And I didn't need anyone to validate it. Not Dennis, not the boys, not even Emily, though I had a feeling she was watching, quietly, maybe even smiling. As I sat on the porch, sipping tea in the fading light, I felt it rise up inside me. Peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had stopped asking others for permission to feel whole. And in that stillness, something inside whispered, it's almost time. Not for revenge, not even for justice, for release, for goodbye, for something so long overdue, it had almost become myth, freedom. The morning began with soft rain tapping on the window, a gentle rhythm that reminded me of lullabies I used to hum when the boys were babies. Before the noise, before the hurt, before I became the woman who held everything together until her own pieces didn't fit anymore. I stood in the kitchen barefoot, wrapping my hands around a warm mug, staring at the empty chair across from me, Dennis's chair. He still lived in the house, technically, but we hadn't spoken much since the day I handed him those divorce papers beside his orange juice. He'd stopped asking questions, stopped trying. Maybe he thought ignoring the cracks would make the walls stop falling. But today, I had something for him. A farewell, not a confrontation. Just the truth, wrapped in silence and ceremony. I packed a small box, nothing more than what I needed. I had already moved what mattered to the cottage outside Asheville, where Emily lived just 2 towns over. She didn't know it yet, but we'd run into each other again. And this time, I'd be ready to be more than just the woman who showed her a box of secrets. I sat down and began writing. 1 letter for each of them. To Dennis, you will read this and assume I'm angry, but I'm not. That part of me burned out long ago. What I feel now is the calm that follows the fire. I gave you my best years, Dennis, and you didn't even notice when they passed. I asked for nothing and you offered less. I used to mourn that, but now I simply let it go. Consider this not a goodbye, but a release. I free you from pretending, and I free myself from disappearing. To Daniel and Matthew, you called me dramatic, a martyr, a weight, but I remember staying up during storms because you were scared of the thunder. I remember hand-sewing Halloween costumes. I remember covering for your father when he forgot birthdays so you wouldn't feel forgotten too. And I remember your words, every one of them. I don't want your guilt. I want your growth. If one day you understand what I gave, I hope it teaches you how to cherish the women who stand quietly beside you now. I placed the letters on the hallway table. Then I cooked one last meal. Not for them, for me. Eggs, bacon, toast with too much butter, the kind of breakfast I used to make for everyone else. This time I sat down and ate it slowly, like a farewell feast to the version of myself I had carried for so long. By noon, I had my coat on. As I reached the front door, I paused. Then, on impulse, I walked to the living room and turned the TV on. Dennis's favorite news channel blared. I turned it off and wrote 3 words on the whiteboard by the fridge. I was here, then I walked out. No slamming doors, no dramatic exits. Just a choice. The cottage was waiting for me. When I arrived, I opened the windows wide, let the fresh mountain air sweep through the rooms like a baptism. I placed my albums, What I Lived, on the shelf, right in the center. The very next day, I received a message on my anonymous channel. It was from Emily. I saw the video, the one with your face. I knew it was you. I just wanted you to know, I'm ready to talk. Really talk, if you are. I closed my laptop slowly, then smiled. Because I was ready. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a woman holding the world together with shaking hands. I felt like a woman stepping into the one she was always meant to be. Free, whole, and unforgettable. The invitation came in a white envelope slipped under my cottage door. No name, just elegant handwriting. You are invited to dinner. One last time. J. At first I thought it might be from Emily, but she always signed her name with a flourish, a tiny loop in the Y. This was simpler, familiar, stiff. Dennis. It was him. I almost didn't go. But then I thought of the years I had swallowed silence like medicine, of the dinners I'd made with shaking hands while he scrolled through his phone, of the nights I'd sat across from him, invisible, and I knew I had to go. Not for him, for me. The house was exactly as I'd left it, too clean, too cold, like a hotel trying to remember what a home once felt like. He opened the door and stepped aside without a word. I walked in. The smell of roast chicken wafted through the hallway, an obvious attempt at normal. But nothing about this was normal anymore. The dining table was set for two, real candles, cloth napkins. He gestured for me to sit. We ate mostly in silence. He kept trying to meet my eyes. I kept looking past him, to the photos still on the wall. Our family, frozen in time. All those smiles that didn't quite reach my eyes. Finally, he spoke. I saw your videos, he said. I said nothing. I didn't know it was you at first. Someone at the gym shared one, said it reminded him of his mom. I waited. He cleared his throat. It was like hearing a ghost. Still, I said nothing. I guess I always thought you were okay, that we were fine. I looked at him then. Because I didn't scream? He looked down. I didn't know how unhappy you were, he whispered. I wasn't unhappy, I replied. I was erased. He nodded slowly. I deserved to lose you. I leaned back in my chair. You didn't lose me. You gave me away. One thoughtless moment at a time. He swallowed hard. I wanted to say sorry. You just did. He blinked. That's it? I didn't come for an apology, Dennis. Then why did you come? I looked him in the eye, my voice calm. Sure, to forgive myself for staying as long as I did. He looked stunned, broken even, but I didn't reach for him. I didn't soften. I had done that for too long. I stood up. He followed. At the door he said, Is there anything I can do? I turned to him. Be better, for the people who still let you close. Then I walked out, into the night, into myself. The stars above the cottage twinkled as I parked my car and stepped inside. My phone buzzed. A message from Emily. Dinner? Just the two of us. I want to tell you about my life. I want to hear about yours. I replied, yes. And this time, I'll sit at the head of the table, because I wasn't a supporting character anymore. I was the author, and my story had just begun. The table was round this time. No head, no sides, no place to hide behind roles or silence. Emily had chosen a small, sunlit cafe tucked between an art gallery and a bookstore in the heart of Asheville. She said she liked it because it was quiet, but full of stories. I arrived early, nervous, holding my breath in the space between then and now. I wore a soft blue sweater and my favorite earrings, tiny silver birds I hadn't worn in years. They had been a gift from Dennis, back when he still noticed things like birthdays and joy. But today, they were mine. She walked in 10 minutes later, cheeks rosy from the cold, a tote bag on her shoulder, a book tucked under her arm. She looked at me and smiled, and this time, it was different. It wasn't guarded. It wasn't uncertain. It was warm. We ordered tea and sat in a booth near the window. No walls, no masks. I've been thinking about that day, she said after our first few sips, at the motel. The way you looked at me. I remember, I said softly. You looked heartbroken. I nodded. I was, but not because of him. No, I whispered, because I didn't know how much of my life I had missed until I saw your face. She set her tea down gently. I wasn't angry, you know, at you. I think I expected to be. But I wasn't. I'm grateful, I said, because I don't know how I would have survived your silence. She smiled again. I thought I had no mother, and you thought you had no daughter. Life really did a number on us, didn't it? We both laughed, a soft, sad laugh that felt more like a sigh. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. I want you to have this, she said, sliding it across the table. I opened it. Inside was a photo frame, a picture of the two of us at the cafe where we first met. She must have had someone take it when I wasn't looking. In the photo, I was laughing, truly laughing. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen myself that way. My hands trembled as I touched the frame. "I want you in my life," she said. "Really in it. Holidays, birthdays, just Saturdays even." Tears welled up in my eyes. "I'd like that, more than you know. And one day," she added, "when I have kids, I want them to call you Grandma." It hit me like a wave. Not grief, not sorrow, joy, unexpected, uninvited, but welcome. We sat in that cafe until the sun dipped low, until the waiter dimmed the lights and placed candles on each table. As we hugged goodbye, she whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me, or on yourself." And I whispered back, "Thank you for being found." That night, I returned to the cottage, lit a candle on the porch, and sat in silence. But this time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was sacred. Inside, on my bookshelf, next to my diary and the albums I'd finally organized, I placed the photo of us, front and center. Not hidden in a box, not buried in the attic, but seen, cherished, alive. Because in the end, I hadn't just served breakfast with divorce papers. I had served myself a second chance, and it was the best damn meal of my life. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.